A warm welcome to all the participants who have joined us for the 23rd session of our monthly series, BISMiS Live. Today we have an excellent speaker with us, Professor Henrik Christensen, who is actually joining us for the second time. Initially, he had joined us as a panelist on a dialogue session that we held in last year. Today, he's going to speak about the synonyms and the stability of names. And he's been investigating evolution and systematics of prokaryotes since 1991. So, for over 30 years, he's been working in the field of microbial taxonomy and systematics. The main part of his research has dealt with prokaryotic systematics, and he's also worked with other areas like population genetics, soil microbiology, and veterinary microbiology. The taxonomy focus has mainly been on the members of the family Pasteurellacea and other bacteria of clinical importance. He is also the chair of the ICSP subcommittee on Pasteurellacea. The ICSP is the International Committee of Systematics of Prokaryotes. He is also a member of the Judicial Commission of the ICSP and also an editor of the IJSEM. And with this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Henrik to start his presentation. We'll take the question answers after the presentation is done.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, good. And you can hear me, I think. Otherwise, please speak up. I come from the University of Copenhagen. It's probably rather far from most of you. And we host at the University of Copenhagen the only veterinary school in Denmark. And actually this year, we are celebrating our 215th anniversary. The veterinary school started in 1773, and we can see here a picture of the first veterinary school at Christianshavn. We are now located at another campus. But back to the subject, synonyms and stability of names. And the subject has been chosen because, in my view, there's a risk that we are now generating too many synonyms, and on some occasions it becomes difficult really to know what we should name some specific taxa. So the agenda for this presentation is first to introduce and explain what the synonyms are as defined by the code. Then I will try to imagine users' perception of some of these synonyms. I will go through some cases, and in the end, try to come up with a conclusion if synonyms are causing too much instability and how we could proceed. So in daily life, we like synonyms. It's creating a rich language for us and improve communication. But in bacterial taxonomy, it's not necessarily so. We use synonyms in two main fields. The first one is when we reclassify a species to another genus, where we keep the type strain, and that in that case we call it for a homotypic synonym. The other main field is the heterotypic synonyms, and we create them when we recognize that two species are very closely related and should actually belong, in the sense of classification, to only one species. Then we have two type strains, and we cannot have two type strains for one species, and therefore the two original species become heterotypic, and we have to refer which one is the earlier and which one is the later heterotypic synonym. More formally, the synonyms have been defined in the International Code of Nomenclature of Prokaryotes. But first of all, we should look at principle 1 of this code because the first 3 points of this principle 1 aim to stabilize names, aim at stability of names. The code aim at avoiding or rejecting the use of names which may cause error or confusion, and avoid the useless creation of names. I will not say that all synonyms are causing confusion or useless, but in some way they can contribute to that. Then we also have a point 4, principle 1, and it is working, so to say, in the opposite direction, because it is giving the researchers, taxonomists, a freedom for taxonomic thought and action. So liberty to reclassify and rename taxa. It is rather new, this point 4. It was not in the code before in the 90s. But probably researchers before that time also had the freedom to reclassify and rename stuff and create synonyms. But yeah, we should also say that we have now an updated version of this code. We are dealing with a 2008 revision now. Sorry. Actually, the code is currently under revision, so we will very soon get a new version also of this code. But this principle point 4 under principle 1, the freedom for taxonomic thought and action, is of course not without limits. It's very much defined by the journals, because the journals have to approve the publications. So in reality, it's the journals that define what taxonomic opinions are being published and presented. The most frequent changes in classification that are giving rise to synonyms, it's first of all polyphyly. If we are dealing with a genus, we recognize it's polyphyletic. We need to reclassify some species so they can get a home in new polyphyletic genera. The other main reason can be monophily, but then it's because we have recognized that a genus is probably too large, so we need to split it, or we need to lump some species together in the same genus, and in that process we are generating new names, and some of them will become synonyms. If we look a little deeper into the code, we will find definitions of synonyms. In Rule 24a, it's defined as note 3 that synonyms may be homotypic synonyms, that if we are dealing with more than one name for the same type, or heterotypic synonyms if different names have been associated with different types that in the opinion of the bacteriologist are belonging to the same taxon. And both for the homotypic and the heterotypic synonyms, then the synonym first published is known as the earlier synonym, and the later as the later synonyms. In the past, the homotypic synonyms were referred to as objective synonyms, and the heterotypic synonyms were referred to as subjective synonyms. And that makes in some way sense, because the heterotypic synonyms are very much being formed by the taxonomists when they classify species and define the boundary of species. And in that way, it's a more subjective process than when we're dealing with homotypic synonyms, because here we are maintaining the type strain, and that is in some way defining a more objective system. Then we're also dealing with the correct name, and it's probably the most interesting for the users of taxonomy. So the correct name is defined in Principle 6 of the code. It's based on valid publication, legitimacy, and priority of publication. And in most cases, priority of a publication is giving most weight. We are simply using the newest name that we will find in taxonomic publications. For instance, here an example of a species, Acidovorans evinae, published by Willems in '92. It is defined as the correct name. It was previously known as Pseudomonas evinae, but it was then reclassified by this work of Willems to become Acidovorans evinae. In the process, the type strain was kept, and therefore we are dealing with a homotypic synonym. But we can actually also recognize in the past another Pseudomonas that is closely related to evinae. It's called Rupilinians, and it was published a little later than evinae, but it has been recognized that they are closely related, and therefore they become heterotypic synonyms. You can see that one was published in 1928, so that would be the later heterotypic synonym, and the other one is from 1909, and that is the earlier heterotypic synonym. So all this can be looked up at LPSN, the main resource for all valid published names and names of prokaryotes. And then we refer to here something abbreviated AL, and that is short for approved lists. And maybe to newcomers, we can explain a little bit about the approved lists. The approved list was published in 1980 in IJSB, and it was actually a kind of a positive list where all bacterial names that a committee at that time thought should be used was placed on. Because before that time, people were dealing with a lot of synonyms and also confusion about type strains. So this positive list was made, and it's also defined in the code as the priority of publication of all prokaryotic names dates from 1st of January 80. On that date, all names published prior to 1st of January and included in the approved list of bacterial names are treated as, for all nomenclatural purposes, as those they had been validly published for the first time. So that's why this approved list, in brief AL, is very important. Then we turn to a new subject. We will think a little bit about users' perceptions of these changes in taxonomy. And as an example, I've taken a list of 58 species that the students at bachelor level at our university have to know for their veterinary curriculum. And when we look at this list, it shows that 72% of these names have actually been unchanged since 1980. So it's what we could call really stable names. So the majority of their curriculum, it's stable. Then we have a series of 9 names that haven't changed in the past 12 years. So it's names that have gone into textbooks and can be used without problems. But still, all of them, as we see, they are synonyms of other names. If we look at the first one, Streptococcus agalactiae, an important pathogen both in man and animals, it's actually a conserved name, so it cannot be changed. But even though we can see there have been a heterotypic synonym in 95. But it's quite obvious that the correct name here is Streptococcus agalactiae. And then the next one is Troparella pyogenes, and it's a homotypic synonym. In the past, this taxon was classified in Actinomyces, Arcanobacterium, or Corynebacterium. But now it's well recognized that we can use this name, Troparella pyogenes. And time will not allow that I go through all these examples, but we can have a look here at the last one, referred here as Listonella angularum. It was published in 86, but later on, people have been reluctant to use Listonella. So they want to call this bacterium Vibrio angularum. So in this case, we are not using the correct name, we are using an earlier synonym. And as I will return in my presentation, that can be used in similar cases. So then we come to the problems. It's the most recent changes that we have had in the past 5 years, and we have 7 of these species. And 5 of them are in Mycoplasma, because recently Mycoplasma has been reclassified into 3 new genera: Mycoplasmopsis, Metamycoplasma, and Mesomycoplasma. And for these 5 species in the veterinary curricula, we can see we are dealing with all 3 new genera. So we will have to really consider if the students should learn this, which are actually the correct names, or they should continue to use the old synonyms. I think for now, we will only teach Mycoplasma, the old synonyms. Then we have another problematic case, Rhodococcus equi. It's a well-known horse pathogen. Have been well known with that name for many years, but it has been recently reclassified as Prescotella in 2002. So that will also be, teachers will really be in doubt what they should call that to the students, and also want the students to write in their examinations. The last one, a reclassification of Haemophilus parasuis, is a pig pathogen, to Klebsiella parasuis. I think that's more justified. And we are now using the new name, but we will also mention that in the past it was called Haemophilus parasuis. So users' perception is, in my view, in a way positive. They are aware that synonyms are used, And they're also aware that taxonomists are trying to do their best to update these names. And sometimes we as taxonomists, we make very names that are very difficult to pronounce, but still users are accepting these names. But they are probably reluctant to use earlier synonyms. Most users will think that they should use the most recently published name. But as explained, it's not always a wise decision in the case, and it's of course difficult then for us to advise, and difficult for the users to know what they should do. As an example of a reclassification where we're using the correct name, and there's no doubt that we should use this name, is, for instance, this Enterococcus faecalis. It was reclassified from Streptococcus in 1984, and it has the same type strain, so it's a homotypic synonym. So it's now a well-recognized species and have been that for years. Another case, it's maybe more surprising. It's the reclassification of Lactobacillus. It was done only 3 years ago, and it was very dramatic because the genus Lactobacillus was dissected into 23 novel genera. But to our surprise, this change has been very well received, and to my knowledge, most users are then now using the new names and accept them. And there's of course a reason for that, and it is because the people involved in this work were really well reputed, not alone well reputed, but also very well recognized into this field of Lactobacillus taxonomy. At another case where synonyms are rather easy to use, it's in this special case called an isonym that was explained by Tyndall some years ago. It's the same name based on the same nomenclatural type that has been validly published independently at different times, possibly by different authors. It's shown here in this example. For instance, in 2000, Leisner and co-workers named a bacterium called Paralactobacillus silangorensis. It was later reclassified as a homotypic synonym to Lactobacillus silangorensis. But then Singh, in their work of splitting Lactobacillus, they in a way classified this species back to Paralactobacillus silangorensis. So that's of course more easy to recognize and to use such a name that's already a synonym again. So you can say that it's a revival of a synonym. Then there have been attempts to explain changes in bacterial nomenclature and also synonyms, especially for the medical and veterinary fields, because it's of course very important that we use the correct names and only one name for one species in the veterinary field. It was actually an initiative in 1994 by ICSP to establish an ad hoc committee to formulate communication of new names to users in medical and veterinary microbiology. And this is an example of a publication where the new bacterial taxa and changes published in 1998 is summarized in this publication by Frederiksen, Maggi, and Ersing. This initiative has been going on, and we see here an example from Michael Yanda in 2016, where he is summarizing the most important changes in bacterial or medical importance. There's, for instance, a table with new species important for the medical field, and also a list of synonyms. For instance, we can learn that Elizabeth Kingia endophytica is a later subjective synonym of the human pathogen Elizabeth Kingia anopheles. And we also have similar examples of heterosynonyms for Klebsiella and Tachymoella. Then the next case we will look into is Pseudomonas. So when I did my master's in the 80s, Pseudomonas was shown as a good example of a genus where all these new techniques had been used to improve classification and taxonomy. At that time, it was mainly DNA hybridization and RNA-DNA hybridizations, which had included many species at that time called Pseudomonas and reclassified them to other genera. So in my view, Pseudomonas has been a well-managed genus. But when I then looked up Pseudomonas in LPSN recently, it was really a surprise to see that we had more than 300 species valid published and with a correct name, and that we have 100 synonyms of this genus. So it's really complicated to look into the taxonomy of this genus. I then tried to make a comparison of how many of these synonyms were homotypic and how many were heterotypic. So the blue bars are the homotypic synonyms and the orange heterotypic. And we see that we have most homotypic synonyms. And maybe that's positive because it's probably well justified with classifications. It's rather even through the years, but we can see we are also tending to have two peaks, one here in the mid-90s, and they probably reflect that at that time, many taxonomies started to use 16R DNA sequencing for classification. And then, not surprisingly, more recently, we have started to use whole genome sequencing, and many of these reclassifications and synonyms have probably been a consequence of the use of whole genome sequence analysis. So we can learn from this that the formation of synonyms, it's also a consequence of the methodology we are using in bacterial taxonomy. We mentioned that it was problematic if we didn't have the same name for an important bacterial pathogen. And it's a case here with Clostridium difficile. It's an important human pathogen, and it has been reclassified to Clostridioides in 2016. Although the genus name has some similarities to Clostridium, it's still different. And users can be in doubt what if is this really the important pathogen, or is it something else? So here we have a problematic case, the use of synonyms, because Clostridioides difficile is actually the correct name. So here users should be really aware that both names are around and they refer to the same species. It's a slide from a review stating some of the pathological lesions associated with Clostridium difficile. We have talked about Rhodococcus equi, and here I will go a little more into detail with that case. It's an important pathogen in horses, and I think next to dogs. So horses are humans' best friend, and there are also some horses have they are like pet animals, and some of them race horses have a very high value. So it's an important pathogen. It's also of some importance as a zoonotic pathogen. I think mainly for people working with horses. But yeah, it's now the current name dates from 1977, and it was included in the approved lists. In the past, it was referred as Corynebacterium equi. But then in 2014, Kempfer reclassified Rhodococcus equi to Rhodococcus huaki. I think huaki is meaning something with a pig. And that was not well received especially by the veterinary community. And there were actually written 2 requests for opinion, one by Garrity for conservation of Rhodococcus equi and rejection of Corynebacterium huaki, and another one by mainly veterinarians, but with the same requests. So this request was dealt with by the juridical committee, and they issued opinion 106, where they decided that Rhodococcus huaki should be rejected. But then they didn't conserve Rhodococcus equi because they thought that it was in a way doubled, both to reject a name and to conserve the other one. It should be enough only to reject Rhodococcus huaki. But as we see, it was probably not so good decision, because last year, Jangid and co-workers, they transferred Rhodococcus equi to Prescotella equi. So in principle, that's now the correct name. And that's, of course, leading to a lot of confusion. So if JC instead, or both had rejected Rhodococcus huaki, but also have conserved Rhodococcus equi, we wouldn't have had the problem with Prescotella equi now. But that's life, and we for current have to live with that name. Another, I think, serious problem is this reclassification of mycoplasma, where we're dealing with 3 new genera, and it's so that the most important pathogen of this mycoplasma pneumonia, it's also reclassified. So the correct name is now Mycoplasmoides pneumonia of this pathogen. And I'm not an MD, but if we look up literature, for instance, here at CDC, we can read that Mycoplasma pneumonia usually cause mild infections, but severe complications can occur that will require hospital visits, and it can also occur together with other complications leading to serious pneumonia, asthma attacks, encephalitis, hemolytic anemia, renal dysfunction, and skin disorders. So here, the MDs should really be aware that they are dealing with synonyms and that they now and then can see this pathogen referred as mycoplasmoides pneumonia. Then that was also reacted by the community. In this case, by the subcommittee of molecules and molecules, and they published a request for opinion to reject all these new genus names. I think the co-authors here are mainly members of the subcommittee. Maybe there are also other co-authors in this publication. It was then replied to by the original scientist behind the reclassification, Gupta and co-workers. Then this case was also brought to the Judicial Commission, and then they issued opinion 222. And at least to me, it was a surprise that these new genus names couldn't be rejected. And the reason for that is the code, and has nothing to deal with neither the original work of Gupta. But if we look deeper into the reason for that in the code, it's if we look at Rule 56A, then it's the right place to look, because we are dealing with such a perilous name. It's a name whose application is likely to lead to accidents endangering health or life, or both of serious economic consequences. So, but this rule only says that it can only be brought into action if it's the specific epithet of the new species that is causing confusion. So that could be brought into action with the Rhodococcus huagi, but with the Mycoplasmas, it's actually the genus name that has been changed. So therefore, we cannot use this rule for rejection of the new species formed. We can also not conserve the older names, because according to Rule 56B, we can only conserve the later synonyms, not the earlier ones. So we can also not conserve the mycoplasma names. So we are in a situation where we cannot use the code, and we have to live with these new names. Either we have to explain the situation for the users, or also completely to change the nomenclature of these mycoplasmas. Then we are showing another case here, more positive, but it's also a case where we're using the earlier homotypic synonym. We are not using what we could call the correct name. And it's so the yogurt, it's fermented with Streptococcus thermophilus and Lactobacillus delbrueckii, subspecies bulgaricus. But it's so that in 1984, Streptococcus thermophilus was actually reclassified as a subspecies of Streptococcus salivarius. And it's a bit problematic because this Stradivarius is a pathogen. So it looks at first like we are putting pathogens in yogurt, but of course it's not so. But the reason to do it was because Farrer and Collins found 67% DNA hybridization between type strains of Stradivarius and Thermophilus. But this was investigated with a membrane filter method, and maybe it wasn't so precise at that time. So in the later Schleifer and co-workers, they did new DNA hybridization and actually justified that Thermophilus should be kept as a separate species. But formally, that's not referred, for instance, in the priority of publications of these names. So in this case, people should also know that they should use the earlier synonym. And then I think we have still some time, haven't we? Yes, a little time. We only have two major subjects to bring up here. One is why we are getting the heterotypic synonyms. So in the past, it was difficult to get access to publications. It had to be posted, and sometimes the same species could be published in different places without scientists being aware of that. But now with the internet, we are of course all aware of a new species published. But the problem is here, if we name species based on only one strain to become the type strain. And if we are then publishing closely related species, maybe they are below 95% ANI and below 70% DNA hybridization. But maybe if they're only 92% ANI, they are still closely related. And if we then identify more strains that are closely related to these two species, these strains can link the species together, and the two species will then become heterotypic synonyms if they are all included. One raised their hand. Okay, I think that's a message just to the audience. Fine. Good, we'll continue. And then we are dealing with a heterotypic synonym. So that's one reason that we are having all these heterotypic synonyms. Then we foresee another problem, because now some people have started to publish names with the SIG code. We have some examples here. And the SIG code is independent of ICSP and ICSN. And this means that we can actually get the same name for two different organisms. It's not analogs. I think it's eponyms or something like that, we can call it. But then we can also have two different names for the same organism, for the same type. So we're becoming synonyms. So with the SEC code, we are increasing the instability of nomenclature. The way NCBI has handled that problem is to refer the SEC code names by candidatus. Then they have been able to show that these names are not published under ICSN. So final slide, recommendations. And I should also say at this point, although Kamlesh mentioned that I'm a member of some ICSP organs. What I've presented here is my personal view, and also these recommendations represent my personal view. So in my opinion, journals should be more strict to reject preliminary work. For instance, where reclassification is based only on the characterization of a single isolate. Also, cases where distances to existing species are very narrow, journals should be carefully publishing such work, because that will give rise to more synonyms. Then, of course, it's important for scientists really to be well prepared with their work, and to include all relevant information about the taxon they're dealing with before reclassification, because this could limit the risk of synonyms are formed. Then it's important that major change in taxonomy is involving the ICSP subcommittees. This mycoplasma case I showed, it didn't involve the molecules subcommittee, and that's also a reason why they asked for this request for opinion afterwards, where they wanted all the names to be rejected because they hadn't been involved in the process. Then we probably need to teach users better which synonym to use where we have doubt, especially for fields like clinical microbiology, food microbiology, and biotech. And to limit the formation of synonyms, it could be necessary to change the code. For instance, to extend the options for conservation and rejection of names at genus level, because in the moment it's not possible to conserve or reject names at genus level, at least not it's not straightforward to do that. But changes in the code, it's of course very much more complicated and takes a lot of time. Finally, I mainly will acknowledge LPSN, because most of what I've said here, it can be looked up at this their website. So with this, I will thank for your attention, and I will be looking forward to receive any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. That was a really informative talk, and I'm sure the audience must have realized the importance of stability of names and how they are impacting the field, especially the veterinary and the clinical sectors. So we've received a lot of comments and questions. I'll take the first ones from Aaron. Aaron has made some suggestions. I would like to read them out so that it's easier for the audience to follow through what we are going to discuss. That's going to come up later on. The first suggestion from Aaron is the 2008 revision of the ICNP is not the most recent version. The 2022 revision of the ICNP, which was approved last year by the ICSP, is already available as a preprint through the ICSP website. And he's also given us a link to the 2022 revision, which is available, and I'm just posting it in the chat box for everyone to have a look. So this is the link to the preprint of the 2022 revision. So that I have posted. The second one is the suggestion about the use of the word isonym. So Aaron has suggested that very recently in 2022, the ICSP voted on the question whether the concept of isonym should be included in the ICNP. and the ICSP voted against this proposal. So the term isonym cannot be used in official literature. Then he also points out that the epithet Hawaii has nothing to do with the pigs. It honors the bacteriologist Louis Hoag. So the epithet Hawaii is actually honoring the bacteriologist. And then he has a question for you, Henrik. And the question is, Henrik, when you call to grant priority of certain synonyms, do you want to overrule the priority rules as defined in the code?
Yeah, that's also Ron. I thank for your comments here. Very appreciated. Also, sorry for the problem with the referring to this Huaki name, but now we got a name, and also thank for the reference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also why I say this is representing my personal view here, because in principle, we should follow the code and should follow the priority rights rules defined in the code. But it's also clear that in some cases, users are not able to do that. And we in some cases we need to use earlier synonyms for what we are dealing with.
Okay.
I think I can think so much more.
Okay. The next question comes from Preben Nielsen, and Preben is asking, thank you for a clear presentation. Do you think veterinarians, food scientists, and others working with microbiology need more training in taxonomy, and how could this be accommodated?
Thank you. Appreciate the question. It's really broad and important. Yeah, certainly it's important that they have more training. But of course, taxonomy is a difficult subject. It's always considered boring, but maybe it has something to do with us as teachers, that we are not presenting it good enough, and maybe not stressing the importance enough. That it also can have importance for human health, and also can have economic importance in case of if we are dealing with biotech organisms. So I think that's both common users, but also people at the companies and consultants. They could be better off with more training, and how that's also maybe more BISMiS presentations like this.
Well,
but of course,
you.
also more courses, formal courses at master student level and similar. That's important. Also
right.
stressing me very clearly that we have this dealing with the code, and how the code should be followed and used. That's important.
Right. So on a very similar line, since you've been working in clinical field and also the veterinary field, how do you think these names have actually impacted your own research work and your day-to-day interactions when you're talking with pathologists or clinicians who actually still believe that the old names are more accurate, or not accurate, but they are more sort of accustomed to use in a daily life?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. And it's, of course, we have, for instance, with this pastoral Asia, we have made numerous changes, and also users have been, it has been difficult for them why we have made these changes. But for most of them, after a couple of years, they have become accepted and well used. Probably the main argument is that they can have misidentification. Often we have this, what we call differential diagnostic problem, that it's difficult to identify a particular pathogen among the background of others. And if we have more distinct names for the pathogens, then it becomes easier. Also, we have problems with the taxa without names. And these taxa have been completely ignored in the databases, now sequence databases. And then by placing a name on these taxa, they have certainly improved identification. So I think some way users understand this problem, but not all the way. And especially, it mainly people learn something during their master study, and they tend to remember that better than new information. And it's always difficult to explain to people that something changed, that something that they learned during their masters have changed their name. But yeah, that's so it is possible, and there's a way out of this. So
yeah, I mean, I can share a practical experience when I was part of the microbial culture collection. We used to offer microbial identification as a service. The most difficult part was for academicians, it's easier to understand. But when samples used to come from the industry, different food industries or anything, and they wanted to identify the organism that they have been using for past, 15, 20 years, and they would know the organism as, let's say, organism X. And when we would identify them and the name has changed, and we would identify them and give them a report of the new name, they would be confused that, oh, we've been using this organism for 10 years and the names, it has always come up like this. And now you are saying that the organism is a completely new organism. So it makes us and them to, understand that taxonomy is an evolving field. It's a dynamically changing field. And the new names awarded to the organism doesn't change the organism. It's just the name that is being changed. Mm-hmm. So it becomes difficult, especially for people from industry and these clinician fields, that it's a field that has made itself adjusted to the new changes in technology. So it creates a lot of confusion at times, but I personally would like to have a name that is very stable, because then it can be used consistently for centuries together.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with that. And maybe also in what you say, then one can mention both the old and the new name to avoid confusion. So we actually also from the biotech field, we have an example where taxonomy has actually been to a benefit, because we are dealing with an organism called Enterococcus faecium, and it's one part of this organism is a pathogen, human pathogen, and another part, some strains are used in biotech production. But then it turned out that this second clade B part is closely related to a new species called Enterococcus lactis. And in that way, it was possible to distance Enterococcus faecium, the beneficial strains of that one, to distance that from the pathogenic ones. So sometimes taxonomy can be used in a positive way.
Correct. Yeah. This next question has come from, I can't pronounce this name properly. My apologies if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. I think it's Xiao Shu Ma. The question is, it is highly likely that organisms which are identified as new prokaryotic species are identified based on their 16S ribosomal RNA, similarity. The question is it still necessary to determine new species based on 16S RNA similarity values? It's a
Yeah,
very general question.
Yeah, I think that the current, so what we call editorial policy is that we still both use 16S RNA phylogeny and also similarity, but also use whole genome comparisons as a sort of extra control. And it's also like we have the 16S RNA phylogeny for 99.9% of organisms maybe, but still the whole genome phylogeny is not that complete. So so we have a more, and I think that it's always good with an extra control, and we have this 16S RNA framework. So it's yes, it is necessary to use 16S RNA also. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is from Javed Ujan, and the question is, what is the difference between a heterotypic synonym and a subspecies?
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I think sometime when I prepared this presentation yesterday, I also thought about this. And it is, of course, that sometime this heterotypic synonym, they will qualify for a subspecies. So then it will be, if one can show that, if one have more strains and see that the two taxa can be distinguished, then the old heterotypic synonym, it will be it will be the species, and then the new heterotypic synonym will become another subspecies. So that's certainly the case sometimes, but I would say if the two taxa cannot be separated, and there's no reason to do that, they shouldn't be classified as separate subspecies. Thank you.
Okay. Wenjun has a question. Wenjun, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Henrik Christensen, thanks for your great talks and rich for information to us. I have one. I totally agree with your proposal in your final slides. You give us some recommendations. You said that the major changes in taxonomy should involve the SSP subcommittee members, but actually, many subcommittees are not so active. Usually, all the proposals for many submissions for ITSM papers only from personal, opinion or some personal group, not for the from the SASP subcommittee. So this is a big problem for many, inconsistent for the how to say simple synonyms occurred. So this is but how to resolve this problem? Do you have some good?
I understand that problem. Also, when I'm looking up reviewers for papers, we should go for the subcommittees, but also they are recognized that it's of course difficult. There are not so many subcommittees, and they are not all active. So it's easy for me to put on paper, but in practice it's difficult to realize. I know that, but we should aim for it. Maybe form more ad hoc committees if at major taxonomic changes planned,
Yeah.
then a hot committee could be formed, and maybe that could be recognized by the ICSP to have some status. So all relevant partners involved could work on this. So, but I agree, it's not so easy that as
Yeah, we can propose this question to IGSM general editor or some like a BISMiS meeting. We can discuss this question again.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe also the subcommittees could be the work of subcommittee could be appreciated better in some way. So it could be more attractive for scientists to participate in such work.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you. That's Kamlesh. I'm okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Henrik. Thanks, Wenjun, for this lovely discussion. Before we close, and I thank Henrik formally, we have a very important and a key announcement that we are going to make now. So as you can see on your screens, we are announcing for the first time BISMiS 2023, the fifth meeting of BISMiS, which will be based on the theme microbial systematics in the metadata era, opportunities and challenges. The meeting will actually very specifically focus on how to use metadata in microbial systematics and how it can be useful, what are the opportunities, what challenges the field is facing today. The meeting will be held at Yushu International Congress Center in the city Guangzhou, China. Will be held from November 5th to 8th, 2023. The meeting sessions are divided into 6 sections. The first one will be cultivating previously uncultivated microbes. Will be followed by changes in microbial systematics, how to name uncultivated prokaryotes, intra and interspecies diversity and speciation, microbial systematics and its impact on biotechnology research, and bridging the gap between microbial systematics and the larger microbial community. So these are the themes on which the meeting will be divided into. So there'll be either individual sessions or parallel sessions going on in different rooms at the conference venue. And that brings me to this very interesting conference venue. As you can see, the Guangzhou city is a very modern city with a cultural twist to it. The International Congress Center can seat about 700 to 1,000 people. So attendees, it is expected to have a scale of 500 minimum participation. So we strongly recommend that you register today for this meeting. And the meeting website is very simple. It's bismis2023.com. You can register at the website. You can look at more details for the meeting, the registration fees, hotel bookings, sightseeing, speaker information, attendees. So all of this information is available on this website, bismis2023.com. And please mark this date, November 5th to 8th, 2023. You have to visit Guangzhou, China for attending the 5th meeting of the BISMiS Society, which is based on microbial systematics in the metadata era, opportunities and challenges. Register today at bismis2023.com. So with this, I'll close, and I thank Henrik for such a great presentation and for discussing on the stability of synonyms and names. Henrik, it was a wonderful session, and I look forward to all the participants to join us for the next session in the next month on the 3rd Saturday at the same time. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Henrik.